The dust kicked up around Eleanor March's worn boots as she stepped onto the wooden planks of Redemption's Main Street. Her jaw set with the kind of determination that came from 3 days of riding alone through Arizona territory in the scorching August heat of 1878. She had arrived in this sun-bleached town with nothing but a letter from her late aunt, a deed to a small parcel of land outside town, and the fierce resolve to make something of herself in a world that seemed determined to push women like her into the shadows. The general store loomed ahead, its false front casting a sliver of shade across the dusty thoroughfare. Eleanor pushed through the door, the bell jingling overhead as she entered the dimly lit interior. The smell of coffee beans, leather, and tobacco filled her nostrils. Behind the counter stood a portly man with a handlebar mustache that seemed to droop with perpetual disapproval. His eyes, small and pig-like, flickered over her travel-stained dress and the way her dark hair had escaped its pins during the long ride. "Can I help you?" The words came out flat, lacking any genuine offer of assistance. Eleanor approached the counter, pulling her short list from her pocket. "I need supplies. Flour, salt, coffee, some dried beans, and whatever fresh vegetables you might have." The shopkeeper, whose name she would later learn was Cyrus Blackwell, barely glanced at her list. "That's so. And how exactly does a woman alone plan to pay for all that?" She felt the familiar heat of indignation rise in her chest, but kept her voice level. "With money, same as anyone else." Eleanor reached into her bag and placed several coins on the counter, more than enough for what she had requested. Blackwell eyed the money with suspicion. "Where did a woman like you get honest coin?" "A woman like me?" Eleanor's voice dropped lower, dangerously quiet. "What exactly do you mean by that?" "I mean a woman traveling alone, no husband, no chaperone." "Makes a man wonder about your character." He crossed his thick arms over his chest, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. From his position near the back of the store, where he had been examining a new shipment of rope, Cole Hartley felt his hand still on the coil of hemp. He had been only half listening to the exchange until that moment, but something in the woman's voice, the controlled fury beneath her calm exterior, made him turn his full attention to the scene unfolding at the counter. Eleanor leaned forward, her hands pressed flat against the scarred wood of the counter. "My character is none of your concern. I have money, I have a list of goods. You have those goods for sale. This is a simple transaction, Mr. Blackwell, unless you are refusing to sell to me based on nothing more than your own small-minded assumptions about what a woman should or should not do." "Now see here," Blackwell's face flushed red. "No, you see here." Eleanor's voice rose clear and strong. "I have ridden 3 days through territory where I faced more dangers than you could imagine in your comfortable little store. I have money earned through honest work as a schoolteacher in Santa Fe. I have legal claim to property outside this town. And I will not stand here and be insulted by a man who knows nothing about me, except that I had the audacity to walk into his establishment without a man attached to my arm." The store had gone silent. 2 other customers, ranchers by the look of their weathered faces, had stopped their browsing to watch. Cole found himself taking a step closer, drawn by the fire in this woman's eyes, the way she held her ground against a man twice her size. Blackwell's jaw worked, his face growing redder. "I do not have to serve troublemakers in my store. You can take your money and your attitude elsewhere." "Troublemaker," Eleanor's laugh was sharp and bitter. "I am asking for flour and beans, not starting a revolution. But if refusing to accept your disrespect makes me a troublemaker, then I suppose that is what I am." Cole set down the rope and moved forward, his spurs jingling softly with each step. He was a tall man, lean and hard from years of working cattle, with sun-streaked brown hair that touched his collar and eyes the color of weathered denim. At 26, he had seen enough of the world to know injustice when he witnessed it. and enough of humanity to recognize something rare and valuable in the woman standing at that counter. "Blackwell," Cole said, his voice carrying the easy authority of a man comfortable in his own skin. "I believe the lady has money for goods and you have goods for sale. Seems straightforward enough." The shopkeeper's eyes darted to Cole, and his expression shifted slightly. Everyone in Redemption knew Cole Hartley. His father had been one of the founding ranchers in the area, and though Cole had spent years working cattle drives from Texas to Kansas, he had returned 2 years ago to build his own spread. He was respected, successful, and not a man to cross without good reason. "This does not concern you, Hartley," Blackwell said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. "Well, I am making it my concern." Cole came to stand beside Eleanor, close enough that he could catch the scent of sage and leather that clung to her clothes. "This lady has been nothing but respectful from what I heard. She has money, she has a list. Fill her order." Eleanor turned to look at this stranger who had stepped in on her behalf. She took in the strong line of his jaw, the directness of his gaze, the way he stood with relaxed confidence. But more than his appearance, it was the fact that he had called her the lady with complete sincerity, had acknowledged her respect and her right to be treated fairly, that made something shift in her chest. "I can fight my own battles," she said, but there was no hostility in her words, just a simple statement of fact. Cole turned to her fully then, and for a moment the store, the shopkeeper, the watching ranchers all faded away. He looked into eyes the color of honey in sunlight, fierce and intelligent and utterly unafraid. A slow smile curved his lips, and he reached up to tip his hat to her, a gesture of respect between equals. "Ma'am, I have no doubt about that whatsoever. But even warriors appreciate allies now and then." Eleanor felt something flutter in her stomach, unexpected and unsettling. She had not come to Arizona territory looking for romance. She had come to escape the suffocating expectations of her family in Boston, to claim the independence her aunt's bequest had offered, to live life on her own terms. And yet there was something in this cowboy's eyes, in the way he had stepped forward not to rescue her but to stand beside her, that made her want to know more about him. "Fill the lady's order, Blackwell," Cole said again, his tone making it clear this was not a request. Blackwell grumbled, but began pulling items from the shelves, weighing and wrapping them with ill grace. Eleanor watched, her heart still racing from the confrontation, aware of the man standing close beside her. When the packages were finally assembled and her coins swept from the counter, Cole picked up the supplies before she could reach for them. "Let me help you carry these," he said. "Where are you staying?" "I have a wagon outside," Eleanor replied, "and I am perfectly capable of carrying my own supplies." "Never doubted it," Cole said easily. "But I am headed that direction anyway, and my mother raised me to be helpful when possible." Despite herself, Eleanor felt a smile tug at her lips. She led the way out of the store, acutely aware of the cowboy following behind her with her supplies. The afternoon sun hit them like a physical force, the heat shimmering up from the street in visible waves. Her wagon, a sturdy if somewhat weathered conveyance she had purchased in Santa Fe, stood at the hitching rail, her 2 horses dozing in the shade. Cole loaded the supplies into the wagon bed with easy efficiency. When he turned back to her, he pulled off his hat in a more formal gesture, revealing hair darkened with sweat at the temples. "Cole Hartley," he said, extending his hand. "And I apologize for not introducing myself properly inside." Eleanor took his hand, feeling the calluses that spoke of hard work, the strength in his grip tempered by gentleness. "Eleanor March. And thank you for your support in there, though as I said, it was not necessary." "No, but it felt like the right thing to do." He held her hand perhaps a moment longer than strictly proper before releasing it, You mentioned you have property outside town. The old Morrison place, Eleanor said. Did you know my aunt? Cole's expression shifted to one of respect. Martha Morrison, everyone knew her. She was a remarkable woman. Lived alone on that land for 30 years, raised sheep, kept to herself mostly but helped anyone who needed it. I am sorry for your loss. Eleanor felt the familiar pang of grief. She had only met her aunt twice, once as a child and once as a young woman of 19, but those brief encounters had left a lasting impression. Martha Morrison had been everything Eleanor's own mother was not: independent, fearless, unapologetic about living life according to her own rules. When the letter had arrived informing Eleanor of her aunt's death and the bequest of her property, it had felt like both a gift and a challenge. I barely knew her, Eleanor admitted. But she left me her land, and I intend to honor that gift by making something of it. Sheep, Cole asked. Perhaps. Or I might try teaching again, though I suspect Redemption already has a schoolteacher. She shaded her eyes to look up at him. What do you do, Mr. Hartley? Cattle, he said. I have a ranch about 10 miles north of here. Started it 2 years ago after spending most of my 20s on cattle drives. Decided I wanted to put down roots, build something lasting. He paused, seeming to weigh his next words. The Morrison place is good land, but the house has been empty for 3 months. It may need some work. Eleanor straightened her spine. Then I will do that work. Again, that slow smile crossed Cole's face, the one that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. I believe you will, but if you need help, my ranch is not far. And I owe your aunt a debt. What kind of debt? The kind that cannot be measured in money. When I was 22, fresh off my first cattle drive and full of foolish pride, I got into some trouble in town. Nothing serious, just a fight with some drovers who thought they owned the place. Your aunt patched me up, gave me coffee and a stern talking to about choosing my battles wisely. I never forgot that kindness. He settled his hat back on his head. So if you need anything, Miss March, you just send word. Eleanor found herself surprisingly reluctant to see him ride away. Thank you, Mr. Hartley. I will keep that in mind. Cole unhitched his horse from the rail, a fine buckskin gelding with intelligent eyes. He swung into the saddle with practiced ease, then looked down at her one more time. Welcome to Redemption, Miss March. Something tells me this town just got a lot more interesting. He touched his fingers to his hat brim and rode off down the street, leaving Eleanor standing beside her wagon, watching him go with a strange mix of emotions swirling through her chest. She shook her head, trying to clear it. She had not come here for romance or complications. She had come here for freedom. The ride out to the Morrison place took 2 hours along a rutted track that wound through scrubland dotted with mesquite and sage. The land was harsh but beautiful in its own way, all gold and brown under the fierce sky. Eleanor drove the wagon herself, enjoying the physical challenge, the sense of purpose. When the house finally came into view, she felt her heart sink slightly despite her determination to remain optimistic. The structure was small, adobe with a wooden roof, one corner sagging ominously. The sheep pens were in disrepair and the small barn leaned at an angle that suggested a strong wind might finish it off. But there was a well, and when Eleanor tested it, the water ran clear and cold. There was a small garden plot, overgrown now but showing signs of good soil. And the view, stretching out toward distant mountains, was absolutely breathtaking. Eleanor unhitched her horses, found enough sound fencing to keep them secure, and hauled her supplies into the house. The interior was dusty and filled with cobwebs, but the walls were solid, and someone, presumably her aunt, had built good furniture that remained sturdy. There was an iron stove, a table with 2 chairs, a bed frame with a thin mattress, and shelves that still held jars of preserved food, books, and various domestic items. She spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning, sweeping out dust and dead insects, scrubbing surfaces with water hauled from the well, airing out musty blankets. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Eleanor stood in the doorway of what was now her home and allowed herself to feel a moment of triumph. She had done it. She had traveled across the country, faced down a bully, claimed her inheritance, and survived her first day as an independent woman in the Arizona territory. And if her thoughts kept drifting back to a cowboy with kind eyes and a respectful smile, well, that was nobody's business but her own. The days that followed fell into a pattern of hard work and small victories. Eleanor repaired what she could, learning as she went from a book on homesteading her aunt had left behind. She fixed fences, patched the roof, and cleared the overgrown garden. Her hands, soft from years of teaching, developed blisters that became calluses. Her skin darkened despite her attempts to wear a hat, and her body grew stronger from the physical labor. She made trips into town for supplies, always prepared for another confrontation with Blackwell, but the shopkeeper had apparently decided discretion was the better part of valor. He served her with barely concealed resentment, but without the overt hostility of that first day. Eleanor suspected Cole Hartley's intervention had something to do with that, a thought that brought mixed feelings. She appreciated not having to fight that battle every time she needed flour, but she also did not want to be seen as someone who required a man's protection to function in this world. She saw Cole twice in town over those first weeks, both times from a distance. Each time their eyes met, he tipped his hat to her, and she nodded in return, maintaining the formal distance appropriate for near strangers. But each time, she felt that same flutter in her stomach, that same curious pull toward him. It was on a Wednesday in late August when Cole rode up to her property, leading a pack mule loaded with lumber. Eleanor was in the garden, coaxing life back into the soil, her dress tied up around her knees and her hair in a braid down her back. She stood when she heard the horses, shading her eyes against the afternoon glare. "Mr. Hartley," she called out, trying to ignore how her heart had sped up at the sight of him. "Miss March," he replied, swinging down from his saddle. "I hope I am not intruding, but I was in town and heard you might need some timber for repairs. I had extra from a project at my ranch, thought you might be able to use it." Eleanor walked toward him, brushing dirt from her hands. "That is very generous, but I cannot accept charity." "Not charity," Cole said easily. "Trade. I need someone to teach my ranch hands to read. Most of them never had the opportunity, and it would help them in their work if they could read labels and signs, maybe write letters home to their families. I heard you were a teacher." "Seems like a fair exchange to me." Eleanor studied him, trying to determine if he was being genuine or simply making up an excuse to help her. His expression was open, honest, without any hint of condescension. "You really need a teacher." "I really do. I have 6 men working for me, and only 2 of them can read more than their own names. It would mean coming to my ranch maybe twice a week, staying for dinner and the evening lessons, then riding back the next morning. I would make sure you had an escort both ways, completely proper." Eleanor felt torn between her pride and the practical reality that she did need that lumber, and teaching was work she knew and loved. "The lumber for lessons seems like an uneven trade, Mr. Hartley. This is expensive wood. Call me Cole, please, and it is not uneven at all. Education is valuable, maybe more valuable than timber. What do you say?" She made her decision, extending her hand. "You have a deal, Cole, and you should call me Eleanor." His hand engulfed hers, warm and strong. "Eleanor," he repeated, and the way he said her name with a slight caress on the syllables made her breath catch. "When can you start?" They arranged for her to come to his ranch the following Tuesday. Cole unloaded the lumber near her barn, then helped her carry several boards to the roof where repairs were most urgent. Working beside him, Eleanor found herself surprised by how comfortable it felt, how natural their conversation became. He asked about her life in Boston and Santa Fe, and she found herself sharing more than she had intended about her family's disapproval of her independence, her love of teaching, her dreams for this new life. In turn, Cole told her about growing up on the frontier, about his mother who had died when he was 15, his father who had passed 3 years ago, about the years spent on cattle drives learning the business from the ground up. He spoke of his vision for his ranch, not just as a business but as a place where men could work with dignity and fair treatment, where they could build skills and futures. Too many ranchers treat their hands like interchangeable parts, Cole said as they worked side by side, hammering boards into place. I want men who are invested in the success of the place, who see it as their home too. That is why the reading lessons matter. I want them to grow, to have opportunities. Eleanor paused in her work, looking at him with new respect. That is an admirable philosophy. It is just decent, Cole replied, though I admit not everyone sees it that way. I have had other ranchers tell me I am too soft, that I will spoil my men. But I have seen what happens when men are treated like animals. They either break or they become hard and mean. I want better than that. The sun was setting by the time they finished the immediate repairs. Cole gathered his tools, clearly preparing to leave, and Eleanor felt an unexpected reluctance to see him go. The house, which had felt like a sanctuary during her solitary weeks, suddenly seemed very empty. "Stay for supper," she heard herself say. "It is the least I can do after you spent your afternoon helping me." Cole hesitated, and she could see him weighing propriety against desire. "Are you sure?" "I do not want to compromise your reputation." "My reputation survived traveling alone across half the country," Eleanor said with a smile. "I think it can survive feeding someone dinner as a thank you for their help. Besides, you said yourself that this is a business arrangement. Partners can share a meal." "Partners?" Cole repeated, and something in his tone made that word feel like more than a simple business designation. "In that case, I would be honored to stay for supper." Eleanor's cooking facilities were limited, but she had become adept at making simple meals tasty. She prepared beans with salt pork, cornbread, and coffee strong enough to strip paint. They ate at the small table, and the conversation flowed easily, moving from serious topics to lighter ones, discovering shared opinions on books they had both read, debating the future of the territory, laughing over mishaps and adventures. As the evening deepened and lantern light filled the small house with a warm glow, Eleanor found herself studying Cole across the table. There was something profoundly decent about him, a quality that went beyond mere politeness to something essential in his character. He listened when she spoke, really listened, as if her opinions and experiences mattered just as much as his own. It was a rare quality in any person, and especially, she had found, in men. "Can I ask you something?" Cole said as they finished their meal. "Of course. That day in the store when Blackwell was being such a fool, you did not need me to step in. You were handling it just fine, so why did you let me help?" Eleanor considered the question, appreciating that he had asked it. "Because you were not trying to rescue me," she said slowly, working through her own feelings. "You were standing beside me, supporting my position, not taking over the fight. There is a difference between someone who steps in because they think you are weak and someone who steps in because they recognize strength and want to add their voice to yours. You did the latter." Cole nodded slowly. "That is how it felt to me too, like I was not saving you from something but joining you in something. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense." They looked at each other across the table, and Eleanor felt the air between them change, becoming charged with possibility. But Cole was too much of a gentleman to push, and Eleanor was too uncertain of her own feelings to encourage more. So instead, Cole stood, helped her clear the dishes, and then prepared to leave. "Tuesday then," he said at the door, settling his hat on his head. "I will send one of my men, Tom, to escort you to the ranch. He is completely trustworthy, and he is one of the two who can already read, so he can tell you about the others." "I will be ready," Eleanor promised. Cole mounted his horse, then looked down at her one more time in the moonlight. "Thank you for dinner, Eleanor. It was the best evening I have had in a long time." "Thank you for the lumber," she replied, "and for the conversation." He smiled, tipped his hat, and rode off into the darkness. Eleanor stood in her doorway long after the sound of hoofbeats had faded, looking up at the stars scattered across the black sky like diamonds on velvet, wondering what she was getting herself into, and finding that she did not mind the uncertainty as much as she thought she would. Tuesday arrived bright and hot. Eleanor had carefully chosen her attire, a serviceable gray dress that was respectable but practical, her hair pinned up neatly, her teaching materials packed in a leather satchel. When Tom arrived, a young man with a friendly face and respectful manner, she was ready. The ride to Cole's ranch took 90 minutes, following a trail that wound through increasingly lush landscape as they neared a creek that cut through the property. Tom proved to be an excellent companion, telling her about the other ranch hands, their personalities and challenges, preparing her for her students. "Most of them are nervous," Tom admitted as they rode. "They are grown men and learning to read feels childish to some of them, but they all want it. They see how much easier things are for me and Carlos, the other one who can read. They want that independence. I will make sure they know there is no shame in learning," Eleanor assured him. "Education is not about age, it is about opportunity." Cole's ranch, when it came into view, impressed Eleanor with its order and obvious care. The buildings were well maintained, the corrals sturdy, the horses sleek and healthy. The main house was larger than she had expected, a sprawling adobe structure with a wide porch and signs of ongoing improvements. Cole emerged as they rode up, and Eleanor felt that now familiar flutter at the sight of him. "Eleanor," he greeted her with genuine warmth, "welcome to the Hartley Ranch. I hope the ride was not too difficult." "It was lovely," she replied, allowing him to help her dismount. His hands at her waist were brief, but sent warmth spreading through her body. The lessons took place in what Cole called the bunkhouse, though it was more spacious and comfortable than that name suggested. 6 men ranging in age from early 20s to mid-40s sat at a long table, looking at Eleanor with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. She introduced herself, asked each of them to share their names and what they hoped to gain from learning to read, and immediately set about putting them at ease with her direct but encouraging manner. She had brought slates and chalk, primers she had purchased in town with some of her dwindling funds, and a plan to assess each man's current level before moving forward. She discovered that 3 of them knew their letters but struggled with putting them together. 2 were starting from nothing, and 1, a Mexican man named Louis, could read Spanish but wanted to learn English. Eleanor adapted her approach for each student, moving between them with patience and encouragement, praising effort over perfection, making the learning feel relevant by using words from their daily work. She taught them to spell horse, cattle, brand, fence, water, food, and watched their faces light up with pride as they successfully formed the words. Cole watched from the doorway, ostensibly reviewing ledgers but actually observing Eleanor in her element. She was magnificent, he thought, the way she commanded the room without diminishing any of the men, the way she made learning feel like a gift rather than a chore. He found himself drawn not just to her beauty, though she was beautiful, but to her competence, her intelligence, her strength tempered with kindness. When the lesson ended after 2 hours, the men were tired but energized. They thanked Eleanor profusely, and she assigned them practice work for the week ahead. Cole had arranged for dinner to be served in the main house, and as the sun set, Eleanor found herself at his table, a simple but delicious meal of roasted chicken, vegetables from his garden, and fresh bread prepared by Maria, a woman from town who came 3 times a week to help with cooking and cleaning. After dinner, Cole showed Eleanor around the ranch, pointing out improvements he had made and plans for the future. They walked along the creek as twilight deepened, and the conversation became more personal. "Can I ask you something?" Eleanor said as they paused beside the water, watching it ripple over stones. "Always. That day in the store, you said you tipped your hat and knew I was your equal. What did you mean by that?" Cole was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I grew up watching my father treat my mother like she was less than him. Not because he was a bad man, but because that was what he had been taught. Women were for cooking and cleaning and giving men sons. When my mother died, I saw how much he had taken her for granted, how much strength and intelligence and capability he had never truly seen or valued. I swore then that I would not make that mistake. I would not assume that being a woman made someone less capable or intelligent or strong. So when I saw you standing up to Blackwell, refusing to back down, demanding the respect you deserved, I recognized something I had been looking for without knowing it. An equal. A partner. Someone who could stand beside me, not behind me." Eleanor felt her throat tighten with emotion. No one had ever spoken to her like this, with such honesty and respect. "That is quite possibly the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me, though I suspect you did not mean it that way. Did I not?" Cole turned to face her fully, and in the fading light his eyes were dark and earnest. "Eleanor, I know we have only known each other a short time. I know you came here for independence, not for romance. But I would be lying if I said I had not thought about you every day since I saw you in that store. I would be lying if I said I did not hope that maybe, given time, you might come to care for me the way I am already beginning to care for you." Eleanor's heart pounded in her chest. Part of her wanted to run, to protect the independence she had fought so hard to claim. But another part, a growing part, wanted to step closer to this man who saw her truly, who valued her for exactly who she was. "Cole," she said softly, "I came here to escape expectations, to live life on my own terms. I was not looking for romance. But I would also be lying if I said I had not thought about you, if I did not feel something when I am near you. I just do not know if I am ready to risk my independence for anything, even something that feels as right as this." "What if you did not have to risk it?" Cole asked. "What if 2 equals could build something together without either one giving up who they are? I am not asking you to stop being strong or independent or fierce. I am asking if you might consider letting me stand beside you as you are all those things." Eleanor looked up at him, at this man who had entered her life so unexpectedly and completely. She thought about her aunt, living alone but on her own terms, strong and independent until the end. She thought about her own mother, married but diminished, always deferring, always small. And she thought about what it might mean to find a third path, one where she could be fully herself and also open her heart to another. "I need time," she said finally. "I need to know that what I am feeling is real, not just loneliness or gratitude or the romance of a new place. Can you give me that time?" "I can give you all the time you need," Cole promised. "I am not going anywhere, Eleanor. Build your life here. Make your aunt's land into something amazing. Come teach my men. Let us be friends and partners and see where that leads. No pressure, no expectations beyond respect and honesty. Can you agree to that?" Eleanor extended her hand and Cole took it, holding it gently. "I can agree to that." They stood there beside the creek as full darkness fell, hands clasped. both of them feeling the potential of what was beginning between them but wise enough not to rush it. When Tom came to tell them he had prepared a guest room for Eleanor, they walked back to the house side by side, not quite touching but aware of each other in every way. The weeks that followed established a rhythm that began to feel like the foundation of something lasting. Eleanor continued improving her property, slowly transforming her aunt's neglected homestead into a functioning small ranch. She acquired a small flock of sheep from a rancher north of town, and though she knew nothing about raising them, she learned from books, from asking questions, from trial and error. Twice a week she went to Cole's ranch to teach, and those days became the highlights of her week. She watched her students grow in confidence and skill, saw them begin to read signs in town, write letters to family, take pride in their new abilities. And she spent time with Cole, long evenings after lessons talking on his porch, occasional rides around his property, shared meals that felt increasingly domestic and comfortable. They maintained the boundaries they had agreed upon, but the attraction between them grew steadily. It was in the way Cole's hand would linger on her elbow when he helped her mount her horse, in the way Eleanor's laugh came more freely when he was near, in the long looks they shared that communicated more than words ever could. In late September, a crisis brought everything into sharper focus. Eleanor's sheep had been bothered by predators, and one night a mountain lion killed 2 of her flock. She spent the next night sitting up with a rifle, determined to protect her investment and her animals. She was exhausted after 3 sleepless nights when Cole rode up unannounced, having heard about the problem in town. "You cannot keep this up," he said without preamble, seeing the dark circles under her eyes. "I do not have a choice," Eleanor replied, her voice tight with fatigue and frustration. "These sheep are my livelihood. If I lose them, I lose everything." "You have choices," Cole said firmly. "You can accept help. I will send 2 of my men to stay here for a week. Take shifts watching your flock at night. You need sleep, Eleanor. You are going to make yourself sick." Pride warred with practicality in Eleanor's chest. "I cannot afford to pay your men." "Did I ask you to? This is what neighbors do. This is what people who care about each other do. Let me help you." "Why?" The word came out sharper than she intended. "Why do you keep helping me, Cole? What do you want from me?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken fears and hopes. Cole stepped closer, his expression intense. "I want you to let yourself be cared for without thinking it makes you weak," he said. "I want you to understand that accepting help is not the same as surrendering independence. I want you to see that being strong enough to stand alone does not mean you have to. And yes, Eleanor, I want you. I want to court you properly to see if this thing between us can become what I hope it might be, but I am not helping you to manipulate you into caring for me. I am helping you because I already care for you, regardless of whether you ever return those feelings." Eleanor felt tears prick at her eyes, a combination of exhaustion and emotion. "I do return those feelings," she admitted quietly. "That is what scares me. I have worked so hard to be independent to prove I do not need anyone. If I let myself need you, what happens if you leave? What happens if you turn out to be like all the other men who want to own rather than share?" Cole reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently cupped her face in his hands. "I cannot promise I will never disappoint you. I am human, and I will make mistakes. But I can promise that I see you, Eleanor March. I see your strength and your fear, your fierce independence and your hidden softness. I see all of you, and I want all of you, not some diminished version of you. If you let me into your life, it will be as your partner, not your owner." "Cole," she whispered, and then his lips were on hers, gentle at first, asking permission, and then deeper as she responded, her hands coming up to grip his shirt, anchoring herself to him as everything she had been holding back came flooding forward. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Eleanor rested her forehead against his chest. "I am terrified," she admitted. "Me too," Cole said, his arms coming around her, holding her close. "But I think the best things in life are terrifying." That night, two of Cole's men, Tom and a reliable older hand named Jim, came to watch Eleanor's flock. She slept for 12 hours straight, her body finally releasing the tension of sleepless nights. When she woke, it was to the smell of coffee and bacon. She emerged from her bedroom to find Cole in her kitchen, cooking breakfast. "What are you doing here?" she asked, though her tone was more pleased than annoyed. "Making sure you eat something before you do anything else," Cole replied without turning from the stove. "Sit down. Breakfast is almost ready." Eleanor sat, feeling strange and vulnerable, but also cared for in a way she had not experienced in years. When Cole set a plate before her, piled high with eggs, bacon, and fresh bread, she found herself ravenously hungry. "Did you stay here all night?" she asked between bites. "I slept in your barn," Cole said, sitting across from her with his own plate. "Perfectly proper, and I wanted to be close in case there were any problems." There were not. Jim and Tom did not see any sign of the mountain lion. It may have moved on to easier hunting. "Thank you," Eleanor said, and the words carried weight beyond the immediate situation. Cole reached across the table and took her hand. "I meant what I said yesterday, all of it. I know, I did too." They looked at each other, and the understanding that passed between them needed no words. They were beginning something new, something neither of them had quite expected but both of them wanted. It would not be traditional, and it would not be easy, but it would be theirs. Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened in ways both profound and ordinary. Cole continued to respect Eleanor's independence, never showing up unannounced unless there was good reason, always treating her property and her decisions as her own. But he also courted her with a steady persistence that wore down her defenses not through pressure, but through consistency. He brought her books he thought she would enjoy, and they discussed them for hours. He invited her to dances in town and showed her off with obvious pride, making it clear to everyone that he considered himself lucky to be seen with her. He asked her advice on ranch decisions, valuing her intelligence and perspective. And he continued to simply be present in her life, reliable and steadfast. Eleanor found herself softening, allowing herself to imagine a future that included this man. She saw how he treated his ranch hands with fairness and respect. She saw how he handled conflict in town, seeking peaceful solutions when possible but standing firm when necessary. She saw him with children, kind and patient. And she saw how he looked at her, like she was something precious and powerful all at once. In early October, Eleanor's small ranch received an unexpected compliment when another sheep rancher stopped by to look at her operation. He was an older man named Samuel Perth, who had been raising sheep in the territory for 15 years, and he walked her property with a critical eye before finally nodding in approval. "You have got good instincts," he told her. "Your fencing is smart, your water management is sound, and your sheep look healthy. If you are interested, I am part of a cooperative of small ranchers. We share resources, information, and help each other out during shearing and lambing season. Having a woman in the group would be unusual, but if you are as competent as your setup suggests, I think the others would welcome you." Eleanor felt a surge of pride at this recognition. "I would be very interested, Mr. Perth, thank you. Call me Sam. We meet once a month in town. I will get you the details." He paused, then added, "Your aunt would be proud of what you are doing here. Martha was a tough old bird, but she had a good heart. Seems you take after her." After Sam left, Eleanor found herself wishing she could share the news with Cole immediately. The realization made her pause. When had he become the person she wanted to tell things to first? When had sharing her successes with him become as important as achieving them? That evening, she rode to his ranch unannounced for the first time, something that felt significant even as she did it. Cole was in his barn, tending to a horse with a stone bruise, and he looked up in surprise and pleasure when she appeared. "Eleanor, is everything all right?" "Everything is wonderful," she said. And then she told him about Sam's visit, about the invitation to join the cooperative, about the compliment to her work. Cole listened with a growing smile, and when she finished, he picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing. "I am so proud of you," he said when he set her down, his hands still at her waist. "You have built something real here, Eleanor. You have proven everything you set out to prove." "I could not have done it without your help," she said honestly. "The lumber, the men watching my sheep, all the advice you have given me." "You would have found another way," Cole said with certainty. "You are that kind of person. I am just grateful I got to be part of your journey." Eleanor looked up at him, at this man who believed in her so completely, who celebrated her successes without any need to claim credit, who supported without smothering. And she made a decision. "Cole Hartley," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I love you. I fought it because I was afraid loving you would mean losing myself. But I have realized that you do not want to take anything from me. You want to add to my life while letting me add to yours. So yes, I love you, and I am ready to stop being afraid of that." Cole's expression transformed, joy and relief and love all washing across his face at once. "Eleanor March," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I have loved you since I saw you stand up to that fool shopkeeper. I loved your fire and your strength, and every day since I have found new reasons to love you. Your intelligence, your kindness, your determination, the way you laugh, the way you challenge me, the way you see the world, I love all of it. I love all of you." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Eleanor kissed him back with all the feelings she had been holding in check. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "Not because you need me or because it is expected, but because two people who love each other as equals want to build a life together. Marry me, Eleanor." Eleanor felt joy bubble up in her chest, pure and bright. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you, Cole Hartley." They decided on a November wedding, giving themselves time to plan, but not so much time that the waiting would be unbearable. The announcement of their engagement created a stir in Redemption. Some were surprised that the independent schoolteacher had agreed to marry anyone. Others, who had observed Cole and Eleanor together over the past months, were not surprised at all. Eleanor insisted on several conditions, which Cole accepted without hesitation. She would keep her property, continuing to run her small ranch as her own enterprise. She would continue teaching, both his ranch hands and potentially starting a proper school in Redemption if the town was interested. And they would be partners in the truest sense, making major decisions together, respecting each other's expertise and autonomy. "I am not marrying you to become your property," Eleanor said firmly as they discussed the terms. "I am marrying you to become your partner. I would not have it any other way," Cole assured her. "Your success is my success, Eleanor. Your dreams are important as mine. We will build a life where both of us can thrive." They worked together to prepare for the wedding and for their life together. Cole began renovations on his ranch house, adding a study for Eleanor where she could prepare lessons and keep her own business records. Eleanor continued improving her property, with Sam Perth and other members of the sheep cooperative offering advice and assistance. Cole's ranch hands, now able to read and write basic sentences, crafted a beautiful wooden sign for Eleanor's property, carefully painting March Ranch in letters they had learned to form in her classes. In late October, a week before the wedding, Eleanor's parents arrived unannounced from Boston. She was working in her garden when she heard a carriage approaching, and her heart sank when she recognized her mother's severe face peering out the window. Margaret March descended from the carriage like a general surveying a battlefield, taking in the modest adobe house, the sheep in their pens, her daughter's work-worn hands and sun-darkened skin. Her father, Howard March, followed more slowly, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Eleanor," her mother said, her tone conveying volumes of disapproval in those 3 syllables. "Mother, father." "This is unexpected." Eleanor straightened, wiping her hands on her apron, refusing to show the turmoil their appearance caused. "We received your letter about your engagement," her mother said. "We came to talk sense into you before you make a terrible mistake." "A mistake?" Eleanor felt her temper rising. "Marrying a good man who respects me and loves me is a mistake. Marrying some cowboy and burying yourself in this God-forsaken wilderness is absolutely a mistake," her mother snapped. "You had a good teaching position in Santa Fe. You could have returned to Boston, made a proper marriage. Instead, you are living alone in the middle of nowhere, playing at being a rancher, preparing to tie yourself to a man with no breeding, no education." "Stop," Eleanor said, her voice sharp and cold. "You will not speak about Cole that way. You know nothing about him, about this place, about the life I have built. You have no right to come here and pass judgment." "I have every right. I am your mother. And I am a grown woman who makes her own decisions. I did not ask for your approval, and I do not need it." The argument was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Cole rode up with Tom beside him, having been in town and seen the carriage arrive at Eleanor's property. He took in the situation at a glance, the tension in Eleanor's shoulders, the disapproval radiating from the older couple. Cole dismounted smoothly and approached with his hat in his hand, every inch the gentleman despite his dusty work clothes. "You must be Mr. and Mrs. March," he said politely. "I am Cole Hartley, Eleanor's fiancé. Welcome to Arizona territory." Margaret March looked him up and down, her expression making clear her opinion. "Mr. Hartley. So you are the man who has convinced my daughter to throw away her future." "Mother," Eleanor warned, but Cole held up a hand gently. "Mrs. March, I understand your concern. Eleanor is an extraordinary woman, and you want what is best for her. But I would ask you to consider that what is best for her might not be what you would choose for yourself. Eleanor has built something remarkable here. She owns her own land, runs her own ranch, teaches adults who never had the opportunity for education, and has earned the respect of everyone in this community. She has done all of that on her own, through her own strength and determination. I am not taking anything from her. I am asking to be part of what she is building." "Pretty words," Margaret said dismissively, "but what can you offer her? Security, position, a proper home?" "I can offer her partnership," Cole said steadily, "respect, love. A life where she can be fully herself, where her strength is valued, not suppressed. I can offer her a home where her opinions matter as much as mine, where her dreams are supported, where she will never be made to feel small or less than. Can you say the same for the life you want for her?" The words hung in the air, a challenge that made Margaret flush with anger. But it was Eleanor's father who spoke next, surprising everyone. "That is enough, Margaret," Howard said quietly. "Look at her, really look at her." "Howard, no, look at our daughter." He moved closer to Eleanor, studying her face. "She is happy. She is healthy. She is strong. When was the last time we saw her look like this? When she was living under our roof in Boston, she was miserable. We both know it, even if you refuse to admit it. She withered there, trying to be what we wanted her to be. Here, she has bloomed." Margaret's mouth opened and closed, but no words emerged. Eleanor felt tears prick at her eyes. Her father had always been a quiet man, overshadowed by his wife's forceful personality, and she had never expected him to stand up for her like this. "Papa," she said softly. Howard took his daughter's work-roughened hands in his own. "Your Aunt Martha sent me a letter before she died. I never told your mother. Martha wrote that she was leaving you her property because she saw in you the same fierce spirit she had, the same need for independence and freedom. She asked me to let you go, to let you find your own path even if it was not the path we would have chosen. I am sorry I did not defend your choices before. I am defending them now." He turned to Cole. "Mr. Hartley, I would like to know more about you and your intentions toward my daughter. Not because I doubt her judgment, but because I am her father, and that is my privilege. Will you and Eleanor join us for dinner at the hotel in town tonight?" Cole looked to Eleanor, letting her make the decision. She nodded, grateful beyond words. "We would be happy to," Cole said. That evening, over dinner at Redemption's small but respectable hotel, Cole and Eleanor's father talked while Eleanor and her mother maintained an icy truce. Howard asked Cole about his background, his ranch, his plans for the future. Cole answered honestly, painting a picture of a life built through hard work, of dreams grounded in reality, of a vision for partnership that clearly impressed the older man. By the end of the meal, Howard was smiling. "Mr. Hartley, you are not the son-in-law I imagined, but I think you might be exactly the son-in-law my daughter needs. You have my blessing." "Thank you, sir," Cole said, shaking his hand. "I promise to honor your daughter and the trust you are placing in me." Margaret remained unconvinced, but even she could not deny the obvious love between Cole and Eleanor, the way they moved in sync, the respect in every interaction. When the Marches departed 2 days later, heading back to Boston, Margaret's goodbye was stiff but no longer openly hostile. Howard hugged his daughter tight. "Be happy," he whispered. "That is all I ever really wanted for you." The wedding took place on a crisp November morning, with most of the town in attendance. Eleanor wore a simple but beautiful cream-colored dress she had sewn herself, with delicate embroidery at the cuffs and collar. Cole wore his best suit, cleaned and pressed, with a new white shirt, and a look of such joy on his face that several women in the congregation got misty-eyed. The ceremony was held in the small church at the edge of town, conducted by a circuit preacher who happened to be passing through. Eleanor walked herself down the aisle, refusing the traditional giving away, and met Cole at the altar as his equal. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising partnership, respect, love, and mutual support through all the challenges life might bring. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Cole kissed Eleanor with a tenderness that made the moment feel sacred. The congregation erupted in applause and cheers, and the celebration spilled out into the street, where tables had been set up for a communal feast. It was a wedding that reflected who they were as a couple. Unpretentious, warm, focused on community and connection rather than display. Eleanor's students read congratulatory messages they had written themselves, bringing tears to her eyes. Sam Perth and the Sheep Cooperative members presented them with a beautiful handmade quilt. Even Cyrus Blackwell grudgingly offered congratulations, though his smile looked pained. As the sun set and the celebration continued with music and dancing, Cole and Eleanor slipped away for a moment alone. They stood on the edge of town, looking out at the vast territory that was now their home, their future spread before them as wide and promising as the land itself. "Are you happy?" Cole asked, his arm around her waist. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be," Eleanor replied honestly. "I came here looking for independence, and I found so much more. I found purpose, community, respect, and you. I found a life that is entirely mine, yet somehow better for being shared." "I feel the same," Cole said. "I had built a successful ranch, had everything I thought I wanted, but it all felt incomplete. You make it whole, Eleanor. You make me better." They kissed as the stars began to appear overhead. Two people who had found in each other not completion but complement, not the loss of independence but the gaining of a partner worthy of their strength. The early months of their marriage established patterns that would define their life together. Eleanor divided her time between the two ranches, continuing to run her own operation while also taking an active role in Cole's. She discovered she had a knack for the business side of ranching, and Cole happily turned over much of the bookkeeping and planning to her capable hands. Together, they made decisions about cattle purchases, range management, and when to sell stock, each bringing their own expertise to the discussion. Eleanor continued her teaching, and the classes grew as more men from neighboring ranches heard about them and asked to attend. She also approached the town council about starting a proper school for children, presenting a well-researched proposal that impressed even the skeptics. By spring of 1879, Redemption had its first official schoolhouse, a modest building constructed by volunteers, with Eleanor as the teacher. Cole supported her work completely, proud of her accomplishments, and happy to adjust their household schedule to accommodate her commitments. They established a routine where they spent 3 nights a week at Cole's ranch, which they increasingly thought of as their primary home, and 2 nights at what they called the March place, which Eleanor continued to run as her own operation. The arrangement was unconventional, but it worked for them. Their relationship deepened with each passing month. They learned each other's rhythms, habits, and quirks. They had disagreements, of course, but they faced them as partners, talking through issues rather than letting resentment build. Cole learned that Eleanor needed solitude sometimes, space to think and work without interruption, and he respected that need. Eleanor learned that Cole showed love through actions more than words, through the way he made sure her favorite coffee was always in stock, through the little repairs he made at her ranch, through the way he listened to her opinions with genuine interest. Their physical relationship was a revelation to Eleanor, who had been raised to view such matters with embarrassment and duty. Cole was patient and tender, making sure she felt safe and cherished, and Eleanor discovered passion she had not known she possessed. Their intimacy became another language between them, a way of communicating that went beyond words. In late summer of 1879, Eleanor realized she was pregnant. The discovery brought mixed emotions. She was thrilled at the prospect of a child, but also anxious about how motherhood would affect her work, her independence, her carefully balanced life. When she told Cole, he swept her into his arms with uncomplicated joy. "We are going to have a baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "Eleanor, we are going to be parents. Are you ready for this?" She asked, voicing her own fears. "For how much will change?" "Things always change," Cole said, "but we will handle it the way we handle everything else together." "You will be an amazing mother, Eleanor, and I promise you, having a child will not mean giving up who you are. We will figure it out." True to his word, Cole made sure Eleanor's pregnancy did not derail her work or her sense of self. When morning sickness made early days difficult, he took over her morning chores without being asked. When her body grew heavy and tired, he hired a young woman from town to help with the more physically demanding ranch work. When Eleanor worried about the school, he helped her find an assistant teacher who could take over when the baby came. Their daughter was born in March of 1880, during a violent spring storm that made getting the doctor from town impossible. Maria, who had assisted with many births, helped deliver the baby while Cole held Eleanor's hand and whispered encouragement. When the infant finally emerged, wailing lustily, and was placed in Eleanor's arms, both parents wept with joy and relief. They named her Martha Rose Hartley, for Eleanor's aunt and Cole's mother. She was a sturdy baby with a surprising amount of dark hair and eyes that would eventually settle into the same honey brown as her mother's. From the beginning, Martha seemed to have inherited her mother's strong will, protesting loudly when displeased but settling quickly when her needs were met. Parenthood transformed them in ways both challenging and beautiful. Eleanor discovered depths of love she had not known existed, a fierce protectiveness that made her understand her own parents better, even as she resolved to do things differently. Cole proved to be a devoted father, taking equal responsibility for their daughter's care in a way that was unusual for the time but perfectly consistent with their partnership. Eleanor returned to teaching after 6 weeks, bringing Martha with her to the schoolhouse. The students, both her adult evening classes and the children in her day school, adored the baby, and Eleanor discovered that teaching with an infant in the room was entirely possible with some creativity and flexibility. Cole built a cradle that could rock on its own in the corner of the schoolhouse, and Martha learned early to sleep through the sounds of lessons and recitations. As Martha grew from infant to toddler, the Hartley household grew louder and more chaotic, but also more full of laughter. Martha was a curious child into everything, fearless in a way that both delighted and terrified her parents. She had her mother's intelligence and her father's easy charm, and she ruled their lives with the benevolent tyranny of a beloved child. In the fall of 1882, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the news brought less anxiety and more simple joy. They knew now that they could balance parenthood with their other commitments, that a child added to their lives rather than subtracting from them. Their son was born in May of 1883, an easier birth than Martha's had been. They named him James Howard Hartley, for Cole's father and Eleanor's. James was a quieter baby than his sister had been, more observant, quicker to smile. Martha, now 3 years old, was fascinated by her new brother, wanting to help with everything, treating him like her personal doll until Eleanor gently redirected her enthusiasm. The years passed in a blur of growth and change. The ranches prospered. Eleanor's school became a cornerstone of the community. Cole's cattle operation expanded, and he began breeding his own stock, developing a reputation for quality animals. Eleanor's sheep cooperative grew stronger, pooling resources and knowledge in ways that benefited all members. Martha and James grew from babies to children, both of them bright and energetic, growing up with an unusual amount of freedom for the era. Eleanor taught them at home in their early years. Cole taught them practical skills of ranching and horsemanship, and both parents instilled in them values of respect, hard work, and equality. In 1885, when Martha was 5 and James 2, the March Ranch merged officially with the Hartley Ranch in terms of operations, though Eleanor retained ownership of her original property as the site of their sheep operation. It was a practical decision, combining their resources and efforts, but it also symbolized how completely their lives had intertwined. They built a larger house that could accommodate their growing family, with a study for Eleanor, an office for Cole, and rooms for children and the occasional guest. That same year brought unexpected challenges when a drought threatened the entire region. Water became scarce, grass dried up, and many ranchers faced the prospect of losing their herds. But Cole and Eleanor, through careful planning and the diversification of their operations between cattle and sheep, managed better than most. They also opened their well to neighbors who needed water, sharing resources in the spirit of community that had always guided them. The drought brought them closer to other ranching families, establishing bonds of mutual aid that would last for decades. It also earned Eleanor the final grudging respect of those few who had still doubted a woman's place in the ranching world. When she stood at community meetings and offered practical solutions to water management and range rotation, even the most traditional men listened. In 1887, Eleanor published a small manual on sheep ranching in arid climates, drawing on her years of experience and the collective knowledge of her cooperative. The manual was distributed throughout the territory and eventually beyond, bringing her recognition as an expert in her field. Cole could not have been more proud, showing off her accomplishment to anyone who would listen. As the decade turned toward the 1890s, the Hartley family continued to thrive. Martha grew into a confident young girl with her mother's love of learning and her father's skill with horses. She announced at age 8 that she intended to be a rancher and a doctor, and neither parent saw any reason to discourage such ambitions. James developed a love for drawing and design, spending hours sketching buildings and dreaming of structures he would create someday. In 1891, Eleanor discovered at age 33 that she was pregnant again, a surprise but a welcome one. Their third child, a daughter they named Caroline Margaret, was born that winter, bringing new joy to the household. Martha and James, now 11 and 8, were old enough to truly help with their new sister, and Caroline grew up surrounded by loving attention. The years between Caroline's birth and the turn of the century were perhaps the most settled of Eleanor and Cole's life together. The ranches were successful and well-established. Their children were healthy and thriving. Their place in the community was secure. They had become the kind of couple others looked to as an example, not because they were perfect, but because they so obviously worked as a team, supporting each other through challenges and celebrating each other's successes. In 1896, when Arizona was moving steadily toward eventual statehood, Eleanor was invited to speak at a territorial conference on education and women's rights. She spoke passionately about the need for equal education for girls and boys, about the value of women's contributions to frontier life, about the partnership model of marriage that she and Cole had built. Her speech was met with both applause and controversy, but it established her as a voice for progressive change in the territory. Cole sat in the audience, bursting with pride at his wife's eloquence and courage. When some of the more traditional attendees confronted him afterward, suggesting he should keep his wife in check, Cole's response was firm and unequivocal. "Eleanor speaks for herself, always has and always will. I do not control her, and she does not need my permission to have opinions or share them. If that makes you uncomfortable, that is your problem, not ours." As the 19th century drew to a close, Martha prepared to leave home for the first time, accepted to a nursing program in San Francisco with plans to specialize in frontier medicine. It was a bittersweet moment for Eleanor and Cole, proud of their daughter's ambition, but aware of how much they would miss her presence. The night before Martha left, the family gathered on the porch of their ranch house, looking out at the land that had been their home and livelihood for more than 20 years. Martha sat between her parents. James and Caroline sprawled nearby, and the silence was comfortable, full of love and understanding. "Thank you," Martha said quietly, "for showing me that I could be anything I wanted to be, for never telling me that my dreams were too big or inappropriate for a girl, for being the kind of parents who led by example." Eleanor felt tears prick at her eyes. "You made it easy," she said. "You have always known who you are, Martha, just like your father and I knew who we were. The secret is finding people who love you for that person, not despite it." "That is what you and Papa have," Martha said. "I want that someday. Partnership, respect, love that does not diminish either person." "You will find it," Cole assured her, "or it will find you. Sometimes the best things come when we are not looking for them, when we are busy being ourselves and living our best lives." Martha left the next morning, and Eleanor cried as she watched the stage pull away, taking her firstborn toward a future bright with possibility. Cole held her close, understanding the complex emotions of watching a child step into adulthood. "She will be fine," he said. "She is your daughter, after all, strong, smart, determined." "She is your daughter, too," Eleanor pointed out. "Kind, principled, brave." "She is the best of both of us," Cole agreed, "and that is all we could hope for." In 1900, As the new century began, Eleanor and Cole celebrated their 19th wedding anniversary and looked back on a life that had exceeded both their expectations. They had built not just successful ranches but a true partnership, a family grounded in love and respect, a legacy that would extend beyond their own lives. That summer, James left for architecture school in Chicago, his drawings and designs having earned him a scholarship. Caroline, now 9, became the only child still at home, and she reveled in the additional attention while also shouldering more responsibility around the ranches. Eleanor was 52 now, her dark hair threaded with silver, her face lined by years of sun and laughter. Cole was 55, still strong and capable but more likely to let his foreman handle the physically demanding work while he focused on management and planning. They moved a bit slower than they once had, but the connection between them had only deepened with time. One evening in late summer, they rode together to the old March place, where Eleanor had first settled more than 20 years earlier. The house had been maintained over the years, occasionally used by ranch hands or as a retreat when they wanted solitude. They sat on the porch as the sun set, holding hands, remembering. "Do you ever regret it?" Eleanor asked. "This life we built, it has not always been easy." "Not once," Cole said without hesitation. "Eleanor, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. This life we have built, this partnership, this family, it is everything I never knew I wanted. What about you? Do you regret giving up your independence?" "I did not give it up," Eleanor corrected gently. "I chose to share it. There is a difference. And no, I do not regret anything. I came here looking for freedom and I found it. But I also found something I was not looking for and did not know I needed. I found a partner, I found love, I found you." They kissed as the stars emerged overhead, the same stars that had witnessed the beginning of their love story more than 2 decades earlier. The kiss held all the passion of new love, but also the depth of shared history, of challenges overcome together, of a bond that had been tested and proven unbreakable. As the new century progressed, the Hartley family continued to evolve. Martha completed her nursing program and returned to Arizona, where she established a practice serving remote ranching communities, often traveling for days to reach patients who had no other medical care. She married a fellow medical professional, a doctor named Thomas Brennan, in 1903, and they built a life together that mirrored her parents' partnership. James graduated with honors and began designing buildings throughout the growing Southwest, structures that combined Eastern architectural principles with practical adaptations for the desert climate. He married a teacher named Sarah in 1905, and they settled in Phoenix, where James's firm became known for innovative design. Caroline, the youngest, surprised everyone by becoming fascinated with law. She left for the university in 1909, determined to become a lawyer at a time when such ambitions were still unusual for women. Eleanor and Cole supported her fully, having long since learned that their children would forge their own paths regardless of societal expectations. In 1910, Eleanor and Cole celebrated their 30th anniversary surrounded by children, spouses, and grandchildren. Martha had 2 children, James had 3, and the house overflowed with noise and laughter and love. As Eleanor looked around at the family they had created, she felt a profound sense of gratitude for the courage she had shown in coming to Arizona all those years ago, for the strength to stand up for herself in that general store, for the wisdom to recognize in Cole Hartley a true partner. "What are you thinking?" Cole asked, finding her alone for a moment on the porch while the celebration continued inside. "I am thinking about that day in the store," Eleanor said. "About how you tipped your hat to me, how you saw me as your equal even then. That moment changed my life." "It changed both our lives," Cole said, pulling her close. "I had been looking for you without knowing it, Eleanor. someone strong enough to stand alone but generous enough to stand with me. When I saw you facing down Blackwell, refusing to be diminished, I knew I had found something rare and precious. I knew I had found you. We found each other, Eleanor corrected. And we built something beautiful together. They stood together on the porch, surrounded by the sounds of their family, looking out at the land they had worked for 30 years. The territory had changed dramatically in that time, moving toward statehood, growing more settled and civilized. But some things remained constant. The vastness of the sky, the beauty of the desert, and the love between two people who had chosen to face life as equals and partners. In 1912, when Arizona finally achieved statehood, Eleanor was invited to be part of the official celebrations in Phoenix, recognized for her contributions to education and women's advancement in the territory. Cole stood beside her with obvious pride as she shook hands with the new governor and other dignitaries. At age 58, Eleanor remained a force to be reckoned with, her mind sharp, her opinions strong, her commitment to equality unwavering. As they aged into their 60s, Eleanor and Cole gradually turned more of the ranch operations over to trusted foremen and their children, though neither of them fully retired. Eleanor continued teaching occasionally, mentoring young teachers and advocating for educational improvements. Cole served on various boards and committees, using his influence to push for fair labor practices and environmental conservation. In 1918, as the First World War ended and the world began to change in profound ways, Caroline returned to Arizona as one of the first female lawyers to practice in the state. She opened an office in Redemption, which had grown from a dusty frontier town to a proper small city, and specialized in property rights and family law, often helping women navigate the legal system that had been designed without their input. All three of their children had found partners who respected and valued them, had built lives of purpose and meaning, had proven that the model of equality their parents had demonstrated could be replicated and passed forward. It was perhaps the greatest legacy Eleanor and Cole could have hoped for. In 1923, Eleanor and Cole celebrated their 43rd anniversary quietly, just the two of them at the old March place. They were both in their 70s now, moving more slowly, tiring more easily but still fundamentally themselves. They sat on the porch they had repaired together so many years ago, holding hands as they had on countless evenings. "If you could go back," Cole asked, "knowing everything you know now, would you still tip your hat to that fierce woman in the general store?" Eleanor smiled, the expression crinkling her face in familiar patterns. "If I could go back, I would tip my hat to you, Cowboy. You saw me when so many others looked right through me. You stood beside me when others would have tried to stand in front of or behind me. You loved me not despite my strength but because of it. How could I not fall in love with a man like that?" "We were lucky," Cole said. "Lucky to find each other, lucky to have the courage to build something different, lucky to have the time we have had together." "Not luck," Eleanor disagreed gently. "Choice. We chose each other day after day, year after year. We chose partnership over dominance, respect over control, growth over stagnation. That was not luck, Cole. That was work and commitment and love." "You are right," Cole acknowledged. As usual, they laughed together, the sound rich with shared history. As the sun set on another day, painting the desert in shades of gold and rose, Eleanor and Cole Hartley sat together in the home where their love story had truly begun. Two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed, who had built a life that honored both their individualities and their partnership, who had proven that equality and love were not just compatible but inseparable. The years continued to pass, each one a gift. They slowed down more, relying increasingly on their children and grandchildren, but they remained engaged with life, interested in the changing world, devoted to each other. Their love story became a legend in Redemption, The tale of the fierce schoolteacher and the cowboy who recognized her as his equal, who built a partnership that defied the conventions of their time. In the spring of 1928, Cole fell ill with pneumonia. Despite the best efforts of Martha and Thomas, despite Eleanor's devoted nursing, he did not recover. He died peacefully in his sleep on a warm May morning, Eleanor's hand in his, surrounded by family and love. Eleanor grieved deeply, as one would expect after 48 years of partnership. But she also carried forward with the strength and independence she had always possessed, the qualities Cole had loved in her from the beginning. She lived 3 more years, dividing her time between her children, continuing to advocate for causes she believed in, writing her memoirs about frontier life and women's experience in the American West. Eleanor March Hartley died in 1931 at the age of 73, peacefully in her sleep at the ranch she and Cole had built together. She was surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, all of them carrying forward the legacy of equality, respect, and love that Eleanor and Cole had modeled so completely. At her funeral, attended by hundreds of people whose lives she had touched as a teacher, mentor, friend, and example, her daughter Caroline read from Eleanor's memoirs, the passage describing the day in the general store when she had stood up to Cyrus Blackwell, when a cowboy had tipped his hat and recognized her as his equal. That moment, Caroline read from her mother's words, changed the trajectory of my entire life. Not because Cole rescued me, but because he saw me truly, acknowledged my strength, and offered his partnership. In that single gesture of respect, he showed me that love did not have to mean diminishment, that I could be fully myself and still be fully loved. Everything that came after, the ranch, the family, the life we built together, it all grew from that moment of recognition. He tipped his hat to me, and I gave him my heart, and neither of us ever regretted it for a single moment. The story of Eleanor and Cole spread beyond their family, beyond redemption, becoming one of the enduring love stories of the American West. Not because it was dramatic or tragic, but because it was revolutionary in its simplicity. 2 equals, choosing each other, building a life of mutual respect and deep love, proving that partnership and independence were not opposing forces but complementary truths. Their descendants carried forward their legacy, generation after generation, each one inspired by the example of the fierce schoolteacher who refused to be diminished, and the cowboy who loved her for exactly who she was. The ranches they built continued to operate, adapted by each generation but always honoring the principles of fair treatment and hard work that Eleanor and Cole had established. In the small museum that eventually opened in Redemption, documenting the history of the town and region, one exhibit was dedicated entirely to Eleanor and Cole Hartley. It featured photographs spanning decades, showing them young and fierce, middle-aged and settled, elderly and content. There were Eleanor's teaching materials, her published manual on sheep ranching, letters between the couple documenting their deep affection. There was Cole's first ledger book from the ranch, a worn hat he had worn for years, a sign he had carved early in their marriage that read Hartley Ranch, founded on partnership. But the centerpiece of the exhibit was a simple paragraph, written in Eleanor's own hand late in her life, framed and preserved behind glass. People often ask me what the secret was to our long and happy marriage. There is no secret, only truth. Cole and I succeeded because we saw each other as equals from the first moment. We succeeded because we valued partnership over dominance, growth over stagnation, mutual respect over rigid roles. We succeeded because we loved each other not despite our strengths, but because of them. And we succeeded because every single day, through challenges and triumphs, through disagreements and harmony, we chose each other anew. That is not a secret. That is simply love in its truest, finest form, and I would not trade a single moment of it for anything the world could offer. The story of Eleanor and Cole Hartley became a testament to what was possible when two people truly saw each other, truly valued each other, truly committed to building a life as equals. It was a love story for the ages, born in the wild frontier of the American West, rooted in the simple but revolutionary act of one person recognizing another's worth and choosing to stand beside them rather than above or below them. Their graves sat side by side on a hill overlooking the ranches they had built together, the land they had loved, the home they had made. The simple headstones bore their names, dates, and a shared epitaph that captured the essence of their relationship. Partners in life, equals in love, together in eternity. And if you stood on that hill at sunset, when the light turned golden and the shadows stretched long across the desert, you could almost see them there still, the fierce woman and the cowboy who loved her, standing side by side, looking out at the life they had built together, at the legacy that would endure long after they were gone, proof that true love was not about one person completing another but about two whole people choosing to share the journey, honoring each other's strengths, supporting each other's dreams, and building something together that was greater than either could have created alone. That was the real Wild West romance, not taming or claiming but recognizing and respecting. Not saving or being saved, but standing side by side as equals, facing the challenges and celebrating the victories together. Eleanor and Cole had found that rare and precious thing, and they had held on to it through every season of their lives, creating a love story that would inspire generations to come. Their story ended, as all stories must, but the impact of their lives continued to ripple outward, touching people who would never know their names but would benefit from the changes they had helped bring about, from the example they had set, from the simple revolutionary act of two people loving each other as equals and building a life on that foundation. And perhaps that is the true measure of a life well lived. Not in wealth or fame or power, but in love shared, respect given, partnership honored, and a legacy that makes the world a little better for the next generation. Eleanor and Cole Hartley had achieved that, and more, and their story would forever stand as a reminder that the greatest adventures are not always about conquering frontiers of geography, but about exploring the frontiers of what is possible when two people truly see each other, truly value each other, and truly commit to walking through life side by side.